one. Hello, and welcome to the Rewards Mastermind. Today's guest is someone who knows that when you get compensation right, everything else starts to click. Engagement, culture, performance, retention, and that's all critical to ensure that that compensation infrastructure is really working well. So Scott Trumpolt is a seasoned compensation strategist with over 20 years of experience helping organizations turn their total rewards strategy into a powerful business success engine. So today, Scott leads his own consultancy, working with companies to craft compensation programs that align with both business needs and human motivation. And that's what we're really going to be talking about today is how to have compensation really be a human motivator. Scott is not just about spreadsheets. He's about making sense. Compensation makes sense, and careers make sense for people to drive performance. So, welcome, Scott.
Well, thank you so much, Sam, for having me on your podcast. I really am looking forward to it.
Yeah, so Scott is it's great to have you, and I know we've had a couple of conversations, but as we first dive into things, I know we have some other comp practitioners and senior HR professionals and so forth from companies that want to learn a little bit more about you. I mean, how did you what was the first spark that got you interested in the compensation profession?
Well, that was some time ago, of course. My overall experience is about 30 years, and the first 18 of those years were in the corporate environment. And my first job in human resources, after I got my master's degree in human resources management, I was awfully lucky because I fell under the leadership of two gentlemen who tried me out in different areas of HR. They wanted me to get a grounding in different aspects of human resources. So I do a little bit of HRIS, a little bit of recruiting, a little bit of the generalist function, but they were really compensation analysts by trade. And they saw that I had an aptitude for that area, very raw, of course, theoretical, but certainly had some skills that I could apply in that area. And so my first 4 years or so, getting mentored by those two gentlemen really helped move my career onward and upward. And from there, it was just a matter of taking on bigger projects, bigger roles in compensation, both as a compensation leader ultimately, but always as an individual contributor too. But one of the things that I noticed was that as I went up the ladder, so to speak, getting higher and higher levels of jobs, I was spending more time on, although I love mentoring individuals because that's what I had, I spent more and more time managing employees and administrative aspects. And I was starting to get concerned that my skills were deteriorating in the area that I loved. My
Yeah.
passion was really in doing design work in the compensation area. And as you mentioned in the introduction, really being able to affect change within the human resources function, specifically in compensation. And in my last stop was in Germany. And over there, I worked in a center of excellence, comp and benefits center of excellence. But I found even more so that I was getting into areas where I wasn't able to make a direct impact. And that's what triggered me to come back home and
Mhm.
to start my own consulting business almost 13 years ago. And in that time, the great thing about being your own person, your own company, is the ability to work on those kinds of projects where you can make that kind of a difference and employ the skills that you've acquired over the time. So I really saw it as the culmination of what I learned previously, the good and the bad, what works, what doesn't work, and then to be able to develop my listening skills that when I listen to clients, which is so important, that's the most important thing for a consultant to me is to listen, but also to have passion for what you do,
Right.
because that can move mountains, absolutely. And that has just been what I've lived by ever since, and it's proved to be a rewarding adventure and a journey that I continue to this day.
Yeah, I agree. And I love to hear that you had a diverse work experience in different areas, not just compensation, but also those other
Yes.
areas of HR. Because, I had the same type of exposure when I was working at BlackRock. Had I started out in international compensation and but then was able to get into a lot of the talent management areas and work in there for a while, and it really was a great way to understand how the different areas of HR connect and how it
Oh,
connects with
yes.
business, working closely with HR advising and so forth to ensure that you understand how this is impacting the business overall is super important. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. From time to time, I took little breaks from pure compensation, even after that mentoring experience for 3.5 years. I worked as a director of human resources for an information technology startup, and that was a fascinating experience. And again, in a startup environment where everybody wears a lot of different hats, it was just very intimate, but at the same time, very exciting. But again, I learned that in that type of environment, again, you have to customize your approach for compensation and in any other rewards. It's just a different world. So again, these are experiences that pile upon themselves and give you something to draw off of as you go forward.
Right, and I know our big topic today is how can compensation really drive employee engagement? And I think that it starts in the entire talent cycle. So when we're thinking about compensation and so forth, and in a competitive environment, how can compensation be the secret weapon for attracting the best people for an organization and getting them in the door? What have you used in the past?
Well, it's interesting you use the word secret. You said secret weapon, and I would even cut that down to the word secret because compensation is very much something that lurks in the shadows.
Hmm.
It's in a black box, as you well know. So when I started getting into the world of consulting, one of the things that I thought would be very beneficial, especially with the world changing, with employees wanting to know more about pay transparency, I thought a lot about how do we take compensation out of that black box, get
Mhm.
it out of the shadows, but do it in a way that is still responsible and in a way that is going to increase employee engagement, not make it worse. Because to me, human resources, as many people know, it's viewed oftentimes as a tactical. It's not a profit center, obviously, but it plays an important role. But a lot of people, when they think of human resources, they think of, well, compliance issues, making sure that employees are following the rules and regulations. They get involved in helping with performance management. They run different processes throughout the year, whether it's in the area of compensation, annual merit pay processes, administering bonus programs.
Mhm.
But that's all day-to-day administrative tasks. It doesn't address the heart of the issue, which is to me the idea of employee engagement. Because if human resources can impact employee engagement levels, that leads to bigger business success. So that's kind of what opens the door. You get your employee engagement levels up, and many companies, you see a lot of these companies, top 50 companies to work for, top 100 companies to work for. Often it's because they have high employee engagement, and that translates into business success.
Right.
So to me, I thought about all of these factors: pay transparency, getting compensation out of the black box, the image of human resources out there as more of a tactical than a strategic partner. And so, where can compensation fit in to all of that? And to me, what it boils down to is this concept of employees are very much interested in their pay, but they're also very much interested in career development. And
Absolutely.
they want transparency to how what they really want, I believe, in terms of transparency is how is it what they do how is what they do affecting the business need? How do they fit into the business need? And
Hmm.
from there, how can they grow? Because when you grow from a development perspective, you're going to naturally grow your pay. They're
Yes.
just the two go together. I mean, we have individuals sometimes in organizations that do a really good job at what they do, but they've been doing the same job for 10 or 15 years, and they haven't really grown. They stay in their lane, they're comfortable where they are, and that's fine. But there needs to be an understanding that from a market pay perspective, you're going to be limited in terms of your future growth. But if you grow and support the business need, and where are they going to learn about the business need? They're going to learn about it from their manager. That's
Sure.
the most important person. The manager may not have their employee growth path for each employee that reports to them all mapped out. I mean, I don't think we can really expect that. But what employees can expect is the idea of understanding managers should know what the business need is, what it's going to be, and steer the employees and their skill sets to helping to strengthen that. These are the skills that you're going to need over the next few years to help us meet this business need. And when you do that, you're going to grow your value within the organization. So when I talk about solutions from a compensation perspective to address all that, what I'm really talking about is market-based pay for the job that you do. And then where does it go from there? What I call, or what we normally call in the business, career architectures.
Hmm.
And there's no such thing as just an accountant or a financial analyst. There are different levels in the marketplace and they pay differently. So I think the emphasis for human resources is that if human resources can provide this kind of career architecture tools to the manager then has the tools to help increase, to strengthen the relationship that they have with employees. And at the same time, you've got the human resources folks that are strengthening their credibility with the business. Because
Right.
once we've got a market-based pay structure that's linked to different levels within a career architecture, does an individual have to move laterally to grow to support that business need? Or do they need to grow vertically? Or can they stay an individual contributor and just keep operating at higher scope and higher levels? These are the kind of things that I think we can emphasize from a human resources perspective and a compensation perspective. And over time, that is going to change the dynamic, even of the work culture. So, for example, an employee goes in for their annual performance review, and the manager talks about, all right, we're only going to be able to give you a 2% increase. And the reason we can only give you a 2% increase is you're already at your market level for your job, and we pay market-based pay. We don't underpay, we don't overpay. That's the company culture. But to me, that's kind of a dead end street for the employee because what we're saying is we want you to stay. Here's your merit increase, which may be considered by them to be substandard. They hear from their manager that they're paid at market value. But we need to change that dynamic and say, this is how you're going to grow your pay over time. These are the skills that you need to acquire. This is where the business need is going. And
Right.
that's how you're going to continue to grow your pay. It's not that you can't keep making more pay, but you're going to have to move in a direction onward and upward to make that happen. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to be a leader of people. That may not be your thing. But with your skill set, how do we continue to grow you? And I think that needs to be the dynamic that changes in that conversation. It's not just about this is all you're getting because you're at your market level to this is how we get you to the next step.
Yeah.
And a well-oiled career architecture that is provided as to give transparency and visibility for employees and particularly managers who are tasked with this. And then on the back end, you've got human resources who are providing these tools and can also play a more proactive role because now you've got this pay structure in place. It's market based. You're linking, and you can say, you've got an individual on your staff, Manager Smith, that's been with us for 5 years, and they're really a great performer according to the performance reviews, but they're only at 85% of their market value. This could be a flight risk. So it's this idea of uh, getting more proactive on human resources side instead of reactive.
Hmm.
And that feeds into the concept of strategy. So it's all these different partners. You've got the employee from a transparency perspective and an employee engagement perspective. You've got the manager's role and then human resources trying to build greater credibility as a strategic partner to them, to the managers. And that's where this type of total reward solution, we hear the word total reward solution. Well, this is bringing together career development with market-based pay,
Right.
and it impacts all the other areas of total rewards. But again, I'm focusing primarily on the compensation aspect because that's what I can influence.
Yeah, so let's dig into that a little bit more. So I know that you mentioned that and I agree, transparency or effective communication is super important for around the compensation process. So it's not a black box. And right now, I think that employees and their managers demand more transparency, understanding how their pay is determined is super important. But then the other piece, and of course, part of our discussion today is how do we take compensation in careers and bring them together to increase engagement. And that really comes between a collaboration between the manager and the employee and having effective conversations. And so let's walk down that path. So the first thing, as pay transparency is becoming more common across the United States and the globe, people are feeling more comfortable to go to their managers to talk about their pay. And also linked with that, how can they impact their pay through career development and performance? And so, in your practice and in engagement with leaders, how are you advising them to help this with this conversation, this communication element?
It's about changing the dynamic. A manager is not going to sit down there with a list of employees in their organization and say, "Okay, you get paid $70,000, and this other person gets paid $75,000." That's not the kind of transparency we're talking about. But what we are talking about is educating managers about how the career architecture system works, giving them tools that they can grab onto. Q&As, for example, which asks are very conversational in tone, and they provide a lot of questions that are typically asked by employees,
Mhm.
and then the manager can respond to this. I think it's very important. It's about the idea that the employee really wants to know how they're going to grow their pay over time. So if we can focus the manager with the different communication tools, like I said, the Q&As, the actual putting them through one of the things that I've done is actually uh, showing how the pay structure is created to managers,
Mhm.
how it's put together, giving them specific examples, actually working through examples of then how does each employee and their job fit into that structure. So we do working examples. And then also we talk about this career development aspect and, career level guides, for example, that show there is a difference between an intermediate level cost accountant and a senior level cost accountant. And it's not about years of experience. The idea is the number of years of experience should reflect that you're operating at a higher scope level. Maybe you're acting as a team leader. Maybe you're managing a project, not necessarily managing people, but you're managing the day-to-day work direction. So you're growing your skill sets. So we have to do kind of a thing where we want the manager, busy as they are, to chip off nuggets of information from from redirecting it purely about someone's current pay and what salary growth looks like in the future. How can you grow your pay and arm them with the kind of tools that I'm talking about, career level guides, uh, Q&A documents, Comp 101 type tools
Hmm.
that a manager can review at their own leisure. And again, it strengthens the idea that HR is a partner that's behind them and is providing them this type of guidance. So it's a lot of it is an education process and trying to make it fit into the work culture. Like I said, there are opportunities. How do you make something part of the work culture? You take existing opportunities like the merit pay process and you change the dynamic, you change what the focus is during that meeting. Not just about, okay, you've got, you're a fully meets performer and you're getting a 2% increase. Like I said before, it's more about um, changing that conversation and starting to answer those kind of questions about let's look at the future and growing your pay. And most importantly, from an engagement perspective, how is it what you do supports the business need
Right.
and how can you grow your value in the business need? That's
Making
the
that.
best way I can describe it.
Yeah, I agree with that. So, and I love the fact that you're talking about these different tools and enabling managers to be able to have these better or more effective conversations with their people. So you mentioned like that an FAQ document of pieces, how compensation is determined and elements of what careers are available across the organization. Now,
Right.
one thing that I also like to focus on is I think that during these discussions, managers need to be able to articulate clearly what are the basic requirements of getting their current job done effectively, to be proficient in their current job. So they need to master that to be proficient and then understand what are the steps and training that is necessary to get to the next level wherever they want to go. It could be, a step up or lateral or whatever their interest is. So
Mhm.
yeah, I find that being a super important element to enable managers with that knowledge.
Mhm.
Yeah. So in now, and the other thing that you mentioned as well, as far as the different directions a career path can take, and so I think
Mhm.
that another piece that is super important in ensuring that there's engagement, you're developing engagement is you're showing different opportunities because there may not be upward potential in some small businesses, right? So
Right.
I so when you're as you're framing this, I mean, how are you helping your clients really understand the different opportunities are available as far as the career framework?
Well, I think the other piece that you need to focus on is transferable skills.
Yeah.
So, for example, maybe you're working in a warehouse. Let's take a warehouse worker. Doesn't seem right off the top that a warehouse worker is going to have much of a developed career movement as a warehouse worker,
Hmm.
but they are getting exposure to the logistics industry, and the logistics career group is very broad, has a lot of different avenues to go down. And that's why every single job, what I try to do is I break I break it down into digestible pieces.
Hmm.
So, for example, with a warehouse worker, I would say your career group is logistics and supply. This is the broad umbrella. And from this, you can go into different families. And literally, what we do is we show the different families. We provide a description of the different families and show where a warehouse worker could move into these different families, again, based on a business need.
Yeah.
They may become a team leader or a supervisor. They may never leave the warehouse, but they might get into more learning customs, brokerage, customs areas, things like that. That's a different family. And the reason we have all these different families to link it back to pay is they pay differently,
Hmm.
you
Yes.
know? So that's the second piece. Creating, okay, you know your career group is logistics and supply. Your family is more specific to what you do. Then there's only three kind of jobs you can have in an organization. Really, if you get down to it, you have a job that requires people leadership. You have jobs that are individual contributor professionals, or you have associates or what I call support workers. Okay.
Hmm.
Those are the three areas. Now, there are a lot of different levels, career levels. But getting back to your point, they need to have exposure to what is beyond today. And what I would do is I say, here's warehouse, here's what people do in a warehouse. Now, some of the things they may not be doing in that warehouse job, they might have a very small piece of that they do. They're a forklift operator or what. But what are some other what are all the other families and what do they do? And how can you, what are the arrow points you can make where you could transfer into maybe starting at a low level again, but gaining new experiences in a different area like customs brokerage. I mean, you could be a customs brokerage assistant, which is a very similar level to a warehouse worker. Okay. They're both support worker, associate level, non-exempt FLSA, non-exempt type jobs. But even at the same level, they could pay differently. So it's this idea that just because you're a senior professional doesn't mean you're going to get paid the same in other senior professional roles. So this helps with the idea of skill acquisition. Okay, warehouse worker, are you interested in learning the customs side? Are you interested in learning all these other functional areas that we have within logistics and supply? And then seeing if there's a business need now. Now, sometimes you have to relocate. Maybe you work at a warehouse that's isolated, but it has other warehouses that are part of the same company. So, in order to move up, you might have to move to that organization. I was very fortunate in that I worked for a very large global organization for a number of years. And a lot of people within that organization realized that to move up, they had to move out of the country to take that next step. Seems
Yeah.
kind of drastic, but that's the kind of mobility you have now. You're not going to have that mobility in a small warehouse environment. In fact, I spoke on another podcast about warehouse environment. And this is the kind of thing I talked about. Do they want to learn customer service within a logistics area?
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
These different roles pay differently. And even though your warehouse role may not lead up to a significant pathway, another area in logistics can. And you've already got a foot in the door.
Right.
So it's about using a little imagination. And again, so breaking down these into digestible pieces, this is what I find to be most effective when I work with managers. They get it. Okay, the broad career group, then you have these different families. So employees should have transparency to all of these different families and how they all link back into the career group that they're part of. And then differentiating what a professional does in this area. Maybe they need to get some more education, what a support worker does and what a people leader does. That's the kind of transparency I'm talking about. This
Yeah.
four-step career group, family, pathway, level. Four
Mhm.
steps.
Yeah, super important. And I think that with the greater transparency, you can bring more meaning to employees in their future career growth. I mean, for instance, right now, comp is a sensitive thing, and it's thought of as very personal. And typically, people understand what their discipline pays. I have a rough understanding of that. You know,
Right.
if you're an accountant, I understand what an accountant pays. But to really have good career options across the organization, you really need to understand, well, geez, I would love to use my skills in maybe a project management type of functionality and being a domain expert in what I'm currently doing. And
Right.
what does that pay? And so understanding different opportunities, I think, is important as a next step that companies need to take as far as transparency. But I wanted to bring up another issue here, another topic here, Scott, that I often find with managers. I often find that managers are sometimes reluctant to talk about career development with their people, and so and I find some of this reluctance lies in just self-preservation and ensuring that because if somebody is promoting or moving out of their department to somewhere else in the company, they lose that person and now they have a hole and they have to think about that. And so, have you witnessed that with some of your clients and having some of this reluctance?
Well, it's a mixed bag because while in the corporate world, I would see some evidence of that. As a consultant, I'm working mainly with the human resources staff.
Mhm.
Yes, I'm doing training and education with management teams, but I'm not necessarily having those kind of intimate conversations
Mhm.
with them about that particular situation. But I think those managers also need to look at where they're going to grow within the organization.
Mhm.
What's the next step for them? So it's a cultural shift, certainly. Uh, the main thing that I find kicking back is just trying to get their attention because they're so busy with other different areas.
Yeah.
I haven't found so much what you're talking about. I could see how that could play itself out, but I think we have to be very careful in terms of giving how we present information at a level that will connect, like I said, the four steps.
Mhm.
Uh, that seems to work very well. And then it varies by function too. I mean, the engineering departments and infinite information technology departments, they are very much more knowledgeable oftentimes about career development.
Mhm.
Engineers, the steps and everything, they get
Right.
it. They believe in it. And IT is career development is really crucial. New skill sets being added all the time. So there are different groups that are actually quite proactive about where they want to go with a career architecture. And they might call them, would use different terms, but I work with them to they might create, for example, 8 different levels, and I'll have to work it back and explain to them, well, there really aren't 8 levels of professional. I know you see it that way, but we have to tie back to the market because we need something objective as much as we can. Because remember, we want to be more transparent.
Mhm.
And if we're creating levels where there isn't really a market justification, we're going to find ourselves in trouble.
Yeah.
Same thing with the job families. I may be getting off the topic a little bit here, but same thing with the job families. They will try and create a family that is really derivative of another family. And I have to keep going back and emphasizing this is a market-based model.
Mhm.
Family that you're talking about is separate, is actually part of this family, and I can't find market data to support what you're talking about. So it becomes an easier conversation because I can't create this market data because what you're talking about as a separate department is really derivative of something else, and hence a problem. So that's the issue with you have to have a basis for every job, every family that you put out there. You have to have market data. So you can only be so creative.
Yeah, I like what you mentioned about uh, making sure that we're aligned with market in a lot of areas. So they specifically in the career path, what we're calling functions and titles, things like this, because we have to remember as leaders of an organization, we're thinking about we want to attract people out of the marketplace, right? And we want to give
Yeah.
them meaningful careers. And if it's something that they don't recognize as a function or it's unique to that particular organization, they have doubts of its transferability to perhaps another employer, and if it's going to hold them back. So I think
Mhm.
it's really important for employers to understand that when we're creating jobs and creating functions and we're creating career paths, we need to make that appeal to the people that we're trying to attract from the marketplace so that they were bringing meaning into their career. It's not all about the company. We have to think about the people behind it. So I totally agree with that sentiment.
Yeah, the one of the big struggles that I have with clients, struggles a little too hard of a word because they get where I'm coming from when I
Yeah.
say this. But with a lot of clients, it's not just me designing something and then disappearing. Oftentimes, they want me to stick around and help them to evaluate new jobs coming into the organization. And I'm sure you can identify with
Yeah.
this, where they'll call me up and they say, well, we can't hire anyone for this manager position at this pay level that you're saying the job pays. And, I'll say, well, let me see the resumes of the candidates that you had come in. And they're all director level employees for
Yeah.
whatever reason. Maybe they think it's going to be an easier job, or they're out of work and they're looking for anything and they're going to move on. And my big question to them is this a fit? Because you're offering a manager role,
Mhm.
and the people that are applying for it are director level employees. And of course they're looking, but this is not the job that you have opening, and they get it.
Mhm.
And we move on from there. But this is a common struggle is it's about, from a market-based perspective, again, fitting people that have the right skill set, that have some room still to grow in that job. When they're first coming into the organization, we have to place them properly, or we'll be refilling that job 6 months down the road.
Yeah, and that's definitely a that perspective of over hiring. It happens a lot. I think that, it's a first of all, managers would love to have a person step into a role that they need that is a superstar. We all want superstars, right?
Sure.
But the sometimes it's more the behavioral element that we need. We need to have somebody that's going to be grow and engage in that role. If we
Right.
overhire and put somebody into a role like that, they're going to get bored and they're going to leave the organization, right?
Right.
And then the other thing is that we have to be careful with just looking at candidates that are coming in. I mean, sometimes if you're a larger organization, you're getting candidates from a smaller organizations. They may have those elevated titles, but they may not have really done the work that is at the complexity of a larger organization. So I think that
Yeah.
some things that there's some layers we have to look into there.
Yeah. And part of that is also I'm always looking at when I develop tools, also what tools are going to be available that I can provide to the recruiter. Job evaluation templates where it's automatically set up to score the job based
Mhm.
on the responses to different questions. So they can say, they'll bring in a job description and they'll say, all right, we want to hire a cost accountant at the senior level. And I do the analysis and say, well, you're only requiring 2 years of experience. This is not a senior level job. And also the job description in terms of the criteria on it and the scope of the job doesn't fit as a senior. So again, there's that disconnect. So what kind of tools can I provide to my internal clients, my audience, human resources? That's part of it as well. There are
Mhm.
different audiences and you got to hit them all with what you're doing
Right.
if you're going to uh, because from coming from the outside, I'm supposed to help improve things, not complicate them more,
Sure. Right.
you know? So that's how I'm always thinking about these things.
Yes. Well, Scott, it's been a really interesting conversation, but as we wrap up things here, then we think about how compensation can really drive engagement in an organization. What are some of your final thoughts that you have for leaders out there and people managers?
I think there's a great opportunity that's coming, a real challenge. The idea that different laws are passing pay transparency laws, but to me, they're kind of a dead end because all it does is leave the individual seeing that pay range asking more questions, getting more questions out of it than answers because
Mhm.
they're just going to wonder where they fit in this range. And I think that it is going to be an opportunity if we play our cards right to turn that into an employee engagement win because I don't think just posting pay ranges does anything for employee engagement.
Right.
I think it's an opportunity for us to address some areas that have been not focused on as much. where we link the aspects of pay, market-based pay for the transparency part, but to the career development, which makes it more objective.
Hmm.
I think there's a real opportunity there as we go forward. And that's the kind of thing that I want to help companies address because more and more states are going to keep passing these pay transparency laws. But again, I'm not sure exactly what it's accomplishing other than perhaps to make employees reading these ask more questions. So we have to find ways of addressing it in a way that still protects the confidentiality of the company, but changes the conversation into something that can lead to employee engagement. So
Right.
that's what I'm focused on.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Companies need to take a more proactive approach to ensure that there's good understanding around compensation and career growth in an organization. Well,
Mhm.
well, Scott, it's been a great conversation. Thank you so much for joining the Rewards Mastermind today and talking about these topics. I think it'll help everybody out there. And so, for people that wanting to dive in a little bit more and talk to you, Scott, what's the best way to contact you?
Well, LinkedIn is a really great place. When this video comes out, I know oftentimes when a video is posted, they'll do a little blurb about the person, obviously.
Mm.
And it would be great to have my LinkedIn profile there. But I am out on LinkedIn. I'm a member of the Better Business Bureau of Southeast Florida and the Caribbean. I have a profile out there and different testimonials of my work and some videos. I do have a website, but again, I think LinkedIn is a great place to reach out to me, to give me a call, or to drop me an email if you'd like to learn more about my services that I can provide.
Great. Thanks, Scott. And to all
Thank
you
you,
listening
Sam.
out there, we'll see you next month on the Rewards Mastermind. All right.
Okay.